Hi everyone, I'm really excited to introduce my guest today. With me here, it's Rebecca Barrett. She's my yoga teacher. I met her in my yoga studio, and I'm really excited to do this podcast because I think, if I'm not wrong, this is gonna be 100 episodes. So it's a bit of a celebration for my side, and I think a lot of topics that we talked about in class and here today will be quite fitting for this celebration. So welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, and so as we are recording this is just beginning of 2021. So we just have a new start of the year, and I thought this is quite exciting because we have been having a very crazy year, and I'm sure we're going to dive into a little bit more about it for our listeners who most likely to be interested in some form well health and well-being related topics, and yoga is the big one. So I think today's conversation hopefully is going to inspire people to do probably healthier things or look after themselves better for 2021, given the year we had. So, a little short introduction. So, Rebecca is a yoga teacher. And before she found yoga, I believe you were having a very stressful job and unfulfilling job as a lawyer. And then, so you were
hmm
inspired by the tangible physical benefits of yoga, but then later on, more the mental part of it as well, which we're going to talk about. And I was really like amazed by, you have what, 1700 plus hours of teacher training. That sounds like a lot of hours.
Yeah, I
So yeah.
got a little bit addicted to just learning more. Yeah.
But I can relate to it because once you become interested in something, you just want to learn more and more and more. And I can tell,
Keep going.
yeah,
Exactly.
she uses it
Yeah.
in her classes because I can feel that, there's new, I don't know, influences every now and then when you come back from time off.
Mm-hmm.
So so she's very experienced, and I love her classes. And one of the things that really got me really want to invite Rebecca to my show is that she often talks about the more the mental parts of yoga, which a lot of people maybe first started with, like you and I, the physical part, but little mental part, which I always found very interesting. It's like a mini, not lecture. Lecture sounds very formal, but mini discussion or talk during the class. So which I love. So that's why
Mm.
we have you here today. So long introduction in a way, but welcome.
Thank you.
So this is like the
Yeah.
beginning of the year, and really hopefully we will set the tone, positive and hopeful for this year, because it have been a crazy year last year 2020 with the pandemic. So, and I know that I definitely want to ask Rebecca about what's the meaning of yoga for her, but actually, kind of often like sometimes spontaneous. But I was wondering before coming on today that, obviously you've been practicing yoga for a number of years. And, with 2020 being challenging for many people for many different reasons, how did you find yoga help you navigating the year? I could imagine that I will be very different if I don't have my yoga or meditation practice to sort of ground me
Mm.
or center me. So, for you, from your perspective, how did yoga help you navigating 2020?
Um, yeah, I mean, it definitely helped. Like I've heard a meditation teacher say before that sometimes when you meditate or when you practice mindfulness, it's like you're preparing yourself for the worst day of your life. Like you're preparing yourself for when these hard times happen. So yeah, like in all of the times that you're doing well in your life, it's good to keep up the practice so that if things do ever kind of fall apart, you can have that practice to lean on for support. And yeah, like I also had a bit of a tough time this year for sure. I stopped working, obviously with the lockdown that we, for there was a good few months that I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to keep being a yoga teacher. And I noticed like yeah, like I needed to practice what I preached in a way, because for a while I was feeling really down and I wasn't practicing yoga, I wasn't meditating, and then I could see that that was really affecting my mental health. So yeah, like it's sort of developing the skill as a preparation for when the hard times come, I think. Yeah.
I can relate to. I remember, I didn't have a long career in sort of dancing, so I did amateur dancing, competing in Latin dance for a few years with my team. But I remember a lot of times that you practice and practice and practice. It's not just that one day of performance, but someone may randomly ask you to dance, and then you kind of have it in you. It's the same, isn't it? That you practice,
Yeah.
the mindfulness
You've got
or
the habit.
the
Yeah.
habit,
You've
and
got
then
those good habits.
and then suddenly in the chaos you can find your feet and ground yourself. So tell me a little bit more about first of all, what draw you to yoga and becoming a yoga teacher, and piggyback on that is that what's the meaning of yoga for you? Because for me, I know that for all these years I've been practicing as a student, for me it's really finding the union between my body and mind. It's about balance and that sort of thing. For me, I feel good after yoga class. But what does yoga mean to you, and how did you come into this journey or this path?
Yeah, so yoga is a really ancient practice, and the way that it's sort of caught on in the West, like the West really emphasizes the yoga poses and the physical aspects of the practice. But yeah, the word yoga, it means union or to yoke, so connecting the mental and the physical. So just by use of the breath, you're connecting your mind with your body. And like for me, and I think for a lot of people, when you first start getting into yoga, it's just for the physical reasons, because yoga is great at improving your flexibility and improving your strength and balance and all of these things. But then the more that you practice it, you can notice little subtle shifts mentally. Like I just kind of noticed that I felt so great after each class, and it wasn't the same as doing any other form of physical exercise. It was just a little bit more to it. And I just sort of noticed a shift mentally as well. And now I would say I'm probably more interested in the mental mindfulness aspect of yoga than the physical, but it started off as physical for me. I think I heard before that, like, if you're already into kind of spirituality and meditation and then you practice yoga, that can help you connect to the physical side of, like, a lot of people might be a bit disconnected from their body. But then if you are already connected to your body, but you don't necessarily have the spiritual side, then yoga can help that as well. So whatever you kind of need more of, yoga can kind of balance that out. Yeah, it kind of gives you what you need. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but
It
then just
does.
sort of how I came across yoga. It was when I was working as a lawyer, and I was really miserable. I just didn't like the job at all. Like, in hindsight, I think I just kind of studied law because my parents were lawyers, and so it was just sort of something that I wanted to follow. But then as I started working, I just couldn't believe that this was going to be my life from now on, and I just felt really miserable. So I was sort of going to yoga as much as I could before I went to work, and then after I went to work, and it just really helped me just deal with the stress of work, of my job that I didn't like. And then when I did finally quit my job, I took a while to sort of to think about, well, what am I interested in and what am I good at? And because I sort of did gymnastics as a teenager, the poses kind of came to me pretty quickly. And so, yeah, that was sort of what made me decide. It wasn't sort of like a dream to become a yoga teacher. It was more that it was just the timing, that I was looking for something to do with my life, and then I realized that this was what I was really interested in.
It's
So
interesting because I
yeah.
thought, you were obviously doing yoga while you're in your job, and then you make the transition that way. But actually, you quit the job, and like regardless,
And then
isn't it?
yeah.
And but like,
Exactly.
they say when the teacher is ready, the student will appear, and the student is ready, teacher will appear.
Mm,
So I'm sure they kind of work in a in a
definitely.
mystical
Yeah.
timeline where when you have the space and you think about what could be your next career, then you just say, oh, maybe yoga. But didn't you, like, the thing is, there's yoga teacher and yoga class, there's yoga teacher and yoga class. So yours for me was quite different. I mean, I wanted to interview you because of the elements that you brought into class. So obviously, you think about the some of the concepts or what yoga have brought to you, not just the physical benefits, but say you talk about, say, letting go, or you know,
Mm,
be mindful, watch your thoughts, and they may not be always true, or that may not be really you, like
mm,
various topics. So obviously, that's, I suppose that could be a transition time or transformation. But did you like when you first started, I mean, what got you really becoming a teacher? Did you find out that actually I really like teaching after a while, or how did it work? Because you like, okay, I stopped working, what do I want to do? And to become what you now, like, seems like a teacher you've been teaching for a long time. You come across really
mm.
experienced. This, how did this happen?
I think it's just from all of the different teachers and mentors that I've had. So I've been teaching for about 5 years now. And like I said, when I first did my teacher course, it was a very physical practice. Which I still am. I'm very interested in sequencing, and I'm very interested in anatomy. And when people have breakthrough moments and they realize that their body is capable of more than they thought. Um, but then, yeah, like I guess because I've done some courses in yoga philosophy, and I've explored lots of different teachers that I like. um and I've realized that, like, with certain sort of spiritual messages or lessons, we can be a lot more receptive to them after we've been moving our body around, or if we're in stretch, or that kind of thing, rather than say, you were going to go to a talk and you would just arrive there and you would sit in a chair and you would listen. um, a lot of what the people are saying doesn't land as much. So again, it's just this mind body connection, that if you're using this meditative practice of moving your body around to put you in a meditative state, then when you can, yeah, like, add little suggestions that come from yogic philosophy or spirituality, people remember it a lot more. Like, you just
Mm.
listed a whole bunch of things from my classes, but it sticks more that way. So yeah, like, it sort of has come from, like, one of my teachers was telling me about how useful storytelling is, and now that's sort of become a really big part of my class, because I can see that, yeah, again, it just sticks in people's heads, like little stories that can help you to remember things. And yeah,
Yeah, and for
so
those people
mm,
don't know, one of these great example is that Rebecca teaches yoga calm, or some people will maybe in some other places they call yoga a yin yoga class where you hold a
yeah,
posture for longer. So she has two special weapon. One is that she started with some warm up, so we not just
yeah,
go straight into yin long hold posture. Um, so that's great because I think we kind of needed a little bit of movement first before we calm down, which I think
mm,
it worked mentally as well. The second is that she tend to tell story, and so you forget about the time. Instead of saying, "Oh, is it 3 minutes yet?" Then you kind of listen to
mm,
the story, and then she take a pause between first and second part of the story. Then you're like, "Oh, okay," and then you turn to the other side. And I
that's
think
it.
that was really great because sometimes it's quite uncomfortable in so certain poses in yin yoga, but she kind of distracts
Mm.
us. So that's your secret weapon, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah. Or also just sort of having, like, yoga is often, you talk about something that's happening on a micro level, so something that's happening right now in your body in a physical way, and then relating it to a macro level, so relating it to something that you can bring into your day or into your life. So I like having that in my classes as
Yeah.
well.
And that's why I feel like you go in for a meal. Like, you get the
Mm.
physical and the mental aspect, which was really wonderful. That's why I think that's I mean, I hated yin yoga for all these years until I started
Yeah.
your class, because I think it's a very different approach. But what
Well,
we're
it is just, if you're not used to sitting still for a long time, it's very difficult for people to just sit still for 5 minutes out of the blue in a stretch. So I can definitely relate into that. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we were talking, like one of the thing I thought the theme of 2020, it's about being in the uncomfortable space. Like with the pandemic, we may be in lockdown, depends
Mm,
where you live. We may not be able to see our friends and family, or go to town, or have a drink, or eat dinner with a bunch of people,
mm,
whatever that is. Or some people, they love to travel, they couldn't, like us, we couldn't visit our overseas families. So I think a lot of us are sitting in this very uncomfortable place. And
mm,
some people suffer more, like loss of job or illness, of course, but different levels, different magnitude, we can't really compare. But I felt, you know taking yoga classes or doing mindfulness or spiritual practices, just like what you said at the beginning, help us to prepare. And I felt
mm,
that last year was a lot of uncomfortableness, like different kinds.
mm.
And it just reminded me how the yin yoga class and last year and being in that space. So how what do you think about, what did you learn from 2020 in that sense?
Well, yeah, like you've just put it in the, yeah, you've just said it exactly. So it's sort of the idea of the micro and the macro. So in the micro level, maybe you're just holding a yin pose and it's feeling very uncomfortable for you. And so then you're just noticing, like, what are my thought processes going on here? And maybe it might be like, oh, I shouldn't have come to yoga today. Oh, what am I doing? How many minutes has it been? How much longer? And then you can sort of practice this sort of acceptance and, yeah, just kind of letting go. And you know what? Yes, it feels uncomfortable, but what if I got a little bit more curious about that discomfort? Is it constant, or does it kind of come and go in waves? And also just to be able to focus on your breath and to know that it has an end, that it's not going to go on forever. And then you can relate that, exactly that, to the year of 2020, and just things that you're going through. You're like, all right, well, I can survive this. I can focus on my breath. Like, that's something that's under my control, and it will have an end eventually. And so, yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like the practice of discomfort, and just being okay with that, letting
Mm.
it, letting
All that
letting
shall
things just pass
pass,
through.
no matter how
Yeah,
long that
exactly.
pigeon is. um,
Yeah. Mhm.
One of the thing I thought about before the show was that, and especially after talking to you just in a few minutes in, um, how surprised you were that you eventually become a yoga teacher, because I'm getting a sense that you probably study law and you probably quite analytical, very I don't know how to describe it. Maybe some people would say left brain driven, or very much
Mhm.
to do and very logical, practical. And I think in my first book I talk about the Athena archetype. It seems to quite fit that bill. You probably tick all the boxes,
Mm.
do all the work, so that you know it's kind of, in a way, a lot of lawyers seem to have the archetype. Obviously there is something
Yeah.
else undercurrent, otherwise you wouldn't say you didn't like that profession. So were you surprised that you actually become a yoga teacher, like looking back, or you think there's always a bit in that in
Yeah, well, I've definitely changed a lot. Like, oh, can you hear me okay? You just
Yes, yes,
paused. You can hear me?
yes.
Yeah, I've just definitely changed a lot since I've become a yoga teacher. Like, if you were to meet me when I was a lawyer, like, I was just very, yeah, completely different. Um, but I think it's just sort of, we're all looking for what makes us happy, and we're all trying to avoid suffering. But we often, like, have different ideas of what's going to make us happy. And then for me, like, I just realized that a lot of things in my life that I thought were making me happy were not making me happy. So, like having a fancy high status job, or like, I used to drink a lot of alcohol and party. And yeah, I just kind of took a big look at my life. And yeah, I just kind of tried things out, just kind of used myself as a guinea pig just to see. And yeah, like there's definitely stressful things about becoming a yoga teacher. It's a lot less money, so you have to really get used to just living a different kind of life. But because I'm so much happier now, like it's just, yeah, it comes easily. But I still do have that side of my personality there. Like I know when I first started studying yoga, I was quite resistant to a lot of the spirituality stuff because I was a very evidence-based person, and I wouldn't have really actually described myself as spiritual, even though now I really am. And I think I just have to look out for those aspects of my personality too, where it's sort of like, you know, say meditation, for example. I don't want to just be good at meditating. I want to be the best meditator. But then that's just so silly because it's only like a fight with yourself, you know, like it's sort of, oh, I want to do all of these silent meditation retreats and get even better. And it's like, it's almost like I want to be the best at relaxing or something. It just doesn't really, it doesn't really work. But I know that I still have that side of my personality, that type A, that just
But
pushes myself a little bit too far.
it kind of
Mm.
like makes you have so much to teach. I mean, what you just said is actually extremely funny, like the best at relaxing. I
Mm.
mean, this is great because many of us may have that problem as well. And I know that you often talk about like telling people, you know, maybe today you're more flexible or stronger or whatever, then like you can do this pose easily, but tomorrow or yesterday, not the case. And I do think that sometimes we try very hard, even in yoga class, and you're like, you obviously you're supposed to put an effort to an extent, but this, you know, I often find this a very interesting topic, this tension and balance between trying hard and letting go. And it's almost that, I mean, the
Mm.
surrendering, it's important, but then part of us say, well, if you don't try hard and if you don't not necessarily push too hard, but put an effort to earn your spot, then you surrender. Maybe you're just giving up. You know, that dynamic, it can be helpful.
The
But this
balance, yeah.
sitting on this tension, it's like sitting on this balancing pivot where it's an art form, because that part of it you kind of need to, if you want to accomplish, if you want to do unbalance, and you have to, you know, I guess do some steps to strengthen your core, your arm, you know better as a
Yeah.
teacher. But then if you don't let go, you cannot let yourself legs up in the air, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like a lot of the time I can just kind of tell by people's personalities, like you kind of know what personality you have. So some people are the types of people that need to be pushed a little bit. Like, you know, you can do this if you just try, like you'll see that you can do this. And then other people I can see that they're wanting too much before they're ready.
Mm.
So that they have to like slow it down. But then yeah, it's strange too because you know, yoga, it's a bit contradictory because it's shouldn't be about the ego. It's about letting go of your ego. But then there's kind of so much ego to it about sort of achieving a pose. And what I've noticed now, like when I first started doing yoga, all I wanted to do was to get all these cool poses. That was like my main aim. I was like, this all looks so cool. I want to be able to do all that. And now that I can actually do it, I just don't care about it because you expect that something's going to happen when you can do those poses, but nothing really happens. And so the poses are just a byproduct of the practice. The real practice is just like connecting to your body, connecting to your breath, and you know, making yourself feel better about your day. So yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, it's helpful for a lot of people listening that, you know, getting all the poses doesn't really make you happy. um, and I know that
Not
some
at
people
all. Yeah.
find quite intimidating, like some more experienced yogi may be like doing all kind of weird things at the front. And then, you know, some days that we may not be up for it, or just not purely some of this pose, you have to be kind of strong and or well balanced. I mean, it's not easy. A lot of poses
Hmm.
not easy, but I find it quite it's quite interesting. And also, like for me, at the first few months when I joined your class, I just had a baby, so my body, I think I was okay and strong and fit, but then sometimes I may lift the baby in a weird angle and then my back is out, and just like it makes
Mm.
no sense, right? I may pick up a cup and then suddenly I'm like frozen, like I cannot move. And
Mm.
but then it reminded me, because the next day or next week when I come to class, so I came in and I realized I cannot touch my knee or on my toes. Then you kind of like realize how your ego was operating beforehand. Because before I was like, oh, I can touch my toes, that's easy. But now it's like I can't even reach my knee. But then you become ever more appreciative or grateful for those days that I have no pain and ache, that I can touch something.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely. Injuries teach you a lot about yourself and about your body, I think. Like there's definitely some blessing in disguise about injuries, because you just learn about what your body is capable of, what it's not capable of, and when to push and when to hold back. So yeah.
it's an art, isn't it? And another
Mm.
thing I noticed about yoga, definitely there's a lot of yin and yang aspect. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so some poses are very, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm making this up, like yang in the sense that it's about strength, it's about maybe holding, it's
Mm-hmm.
about building the fire. And then there's some other poses is very much about staying, being fluid or flexible, more yin. So that's a lot of, I found it interesting to think about the duality, that aspect, in terms of yoga, but a lot of times in our life as well. I mentioned in a conversation while email about while back about one of the podcasts I listened to about spirituality and politics and even moving our body.
Mm.
There's this destroy before you can create, and sometimes maybe you have to remove, declutter before you can add new thing, create space. And the same times that sometimes we have to change our mindset. Maybe we need to empty, or we need to stop doing what we used to do, and then move into a new chapter. So what do you think about that, and how do you see it apply in your life? Do you see this yin and yang aspect, maybe coming from yoga? Because I imagine you do a lot of things through the lens of thinking in the philosophy of that path.
Yeah, I mean, letting go is often a big subject in my classes. So it comes up a lot in just like all sorts of different ways, especially just in the physical sense that like we often store different emotions and memories in our body. And so by coming into difficult yoga poses, it just can help those emotions kind of move through us. Um, yeah, and I guess yoga just really helps because it's all about mindfulness and self-observation, and that kind of thing. um yeah, like what you were saying before about you know a lot of the time, just from observing ourselves and observing our thoughts, we realize that a lot of the thoughts that we have, they're not even our thoughts, they're just messages that we've received. So it's then the choice that we have is what we're going to do with those thoughts, and that's when we can just choose to sort of let them roll over us and just kind of move on with our day and not try to sort of take on negative energy. And I think the same thing can happen just in a yoga pose. Like you might attempt it. If it's a really challenging one, maybe you can do it, and maybe you can't, and you just try to stop that and just move on to what's next. So yeah, it's just yoga is just it's a practice, and you don't always need to be amazing at that practice to receive all of its benefits. So
Mm.
yeah, it's a yin and yang sort of push and pull thing.
And
Hmm.
I'm mindful of the time, but there's one question that I often want to ask you. So, what inspires you these days? I mean, what will, like, does it, like, how do you come up with all this rich content or teaching? I mean, I get it as sequence, but there's also ideas behind things. And so, what inspires you this day, and where do you get inspiration from? How can you keep yourself being creative in that sense?
Yeah, well, I'm always trying to stay connected to like just different sources of inspiration, like always reading different books and listening to different podcasts. But yeah, like I said, stories are my thing. So I'm often even just sometimes like Googling like what is, interesting Zen Buddhist stories that teach you a lesson, like stories that have a lesson at the end of them, and then I try to kind of turn that into a class. But there's a woman called Tara Brach,
Mm-hmm.
and she has a great podcast, and I get a lot of my ideas from her, also from a guy called Joseph Goldstein. So he's sort of a Buddhist meditation teacher, and his themes are really, really well put. But then also, well, if I was to recommend a book, my favorite book that really changed my life is called, I think we've talked about it at the end of a class as well, but it's called The Untethered Soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by a guy called Michael Singer. And that was sort of a big like epiphany moment for me, because it just talks a lot about this voice in your head, and how that voice is not you. And a lot of us are just so identified with that voice that we don't even notice that it's there, because we just think that it is us. And it was just so enlightening for me just to realize, okay, well, that's a thought. Or even I was just listening to a podcast today that said, don't believe, you don't have to believe all of your thoughts, like your thoughts are not facts. You can just kind of choose what you want to do with them, and then you can even sort of train yourself about the thoughts that you allow yourself to have. And because we're often just very harsh on ourselves with lots of negative self-talk. And so I love learning about that, because that can just change the quality of your life so much. So
Yeah,
yeah.
we had that conversation about Michael Singer, and I love his
Yeah.
other book about his life story. Actually, I forgot the name. Oh, the Gratitude Experiment, really about
Yeah.
his life story.
The
Fascinating.
surrender, was it the surrender experiment?
Experiment, yeah, I found it
Yeah.
like, yeah, definitely a very interesting guy, how he put his thought into practice, like, you know how he really take the surrender to the next level. And
Mm.
what I've learned from his book, I think one of the most things is that sometimes, even though when you make a commitment to surrender to something, even though you may not see why this relevant, or you may not like it, but he made the commitment to surrender. So he didn't like people to pitch tent in his land. He just want to meditate by himself. But people came to him.
Mm.
He draw people, he attracted people. But then at the end, it turns out to be
Yeah.
a very good thing years later, but you may not have the full picture. But when we make the
Yeah.
commitment to surrender, or when we make the commitment to be mindful about our thoughts, we sometimes we see the immediate benefit, I suppose, after a class, or even in a few moments if you meditate. But sometimes certain things are more long term, like having
Yeah.
this practice. You don't see the full picture, but I think part of it is knowing you just got to trust and keep going, and then it leads you somewhere.
Mm. Yeah, it's like there's another sort of yogic phrase, which is like, what if every single thing that is happening to us is for our spiritual awakening? So everything in a way is a lesson, and you can kind of think of it in that way. That was all sort of
Mm.
meant to be, because it got you to where you are. And yeah, I
Another
like that
thing
idea.
I found it very interesting is that there's some misconception out there, thinking like spiritual people, or I don't know, maybe they will brand it like some yoga teachers, or some, I don't know, psychic reader, let's just say. They're very spiritual, but then they will be like all woo woo, and therefore not very productive. But I think, like, I know enough spiritual teachers and yoga teachers, they're actually very productive people. Like, you listen to podcasts, you read, obviously, and you bring in fresh concepts, material to the class. So, and I actually think that spiritual people can be highly productive people, because their head is a bit above water, so they do the right thing
Yeah.
rather than doing all sort of things to keep them busy, but nothing real.
Yeah, well, I guess I still just sort of have that lawyer side of me as well. That's always about, being productive and getting things
But
done.
that's
And
what you
and
think.
yeah.
And my observation is, whether you, the thing is that sometimes being productive doesn't mean that you have to sit certain amount of hours in the chair. But if your head and mind is
Mm.
clear, you produce things. Maybe you read a book and immediately you have a very amazing lesson planned, but it may
Yeah.
take people hours to dissect it if they are not having the sort of mindfulness practice, or grounded, or I don't know how to put it. But I actually think that a lot of this is actually making us more productive. I don't know, I found myself a lot more productive than I was years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about just sort of staying curious as
Mm.
well. Like I'm sort of always, yeah, just seeing what's out there that I can listen to, and using those things as ideas that could become a class, maybe.
Stay
Sometimes it
curious.
works and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
So it's like Elizabeth, oh, suddenly I forgot her last name, wrote,
Is it Gilbert?
Yes, Gilbert, staying curious. Like forget about passion, because sometimes we put too
Mm,
much pressure on the
that's
passion.
true. Yeah.
Just stay
Yeah,
curious.
that was a great book.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. And last word, it's about 2021 now. We'll just step into it. So if there's anything that, on your mind about bringing in the new year, or new year dream, ideas, goals, kind words, what's on your mind about 2021?
Well, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with what we were talking about, of just sort of accepting and not always trying to change things that are outside of your control. Yeah, like I just spent New Year's with like a good friend of mine who's also a yoga teacher. So we were talking about this quite a bit. And I think a lot of us are so busy thinking about how we want things to be different. So my intention is this year to um, want what I have, so to be really grateful for what's already here in front of me. And like, of course, have goals, that's great, but to not forget about how lucky I am to have
Mm.
what's already here, not thinking about how things could be different and what I want to fix and that kind of thing. So yeah,
Wow,
that's
that's
my resolution.
great. And that's a great way
Mm.
to end our interview today. I
Mhm.
think that's really cool, because we're so outward looking sometimes to say what's the next best thing,
Mm.
next level, next goal, dream board. But
Yeah.
just not to push ourselves into that, but thinking already what we
It's already
have.
here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
already here. And
exactly.
I used to say grateful for what you have and what you don't have, because certain things you don't
Mm.
want to have it. And but you only realize that if you actually grateful for what you have.
Mm, exactly. Yeah, and thinking about it could be much worse, and yeah, so we're
Good.
lucky.
Well, thank you so much for today. And I hope we'll inspire some
Excellent.
people to be more mindful with the day, maybe explore the yogi philosophy or come to a class. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So if people are curious about joining you for a class, where do you teach, and how could people get in touch with you? Like your social media, for instance?
Yeah, so I teach at Fitness Playground at Body Mind Life and B1 Yoga, 3 different studios. And I guess maybe the best way would be Instagram if you wanted to get in touch with me. And my username is Beckasana, so it's BECK_ASANA. It's just sort of a play around with like my name and a yoga pose, which is also called Beckasana. So that's
Oh,
why.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So thank
Yeah,
you
that's
so
why.
much for today, and I hope you will
You're
have
welcome.
a great start of 2021.
You too. And I'll see you at the next Yoga Calm.
Yeah.
See you there. Okay.